Yes, we're here today on a very sunny day in Edmonton, and I thought I'd go outside and do a retrospective of a rum that I tried a very long time ago. It was one of the first rums of its kind that I found back in the day before I knew enough to really go into detail about it. So these days, you're not going to find this bottle very often, and it's a very strange shape, which I'll get into in a second. And it is one of the first, if not the first, editions that actually showcased a single still, even though it was only at 40%. So let's get into the background right away. This is an El Dorado rum from Guyana, and it has a mark of ICBU. It was issued as far back as 2007. And the reason for the shape is because it resembles a cricket bat. And there was a limited edition of 3 different marks: the PM, Port Morant, the EHP, the Enmore Still, and the ICBU, which is what this one is. Those 3 stills are the Port Morant still, which everybody knows, the double retort pot still, wooden; the EHP, which is the Enmore still, the coffee still, albeit also made out of wood; and the French Savalle Still, which was at Uitvlugt. So the ICBU is a mark that stands for Ignatius Christian. Oh, I forget what the P is for. I'll get it in the show notes. Bonner, that's it. ICBU, B for Bonner. Plantation Uitvlugt, that's what the ICBU is for. And it's bottled at 40%. And in 2007, the Cricket World Cup hit Guyana. And as a consequence, EDDL put out a limited edition of these 3 things. We have no idea what the outturn is, unfortunately, and put them on the market, which is why 2009, I was still able to find this in Calgary when I was the host of the book club that I was a member of, which got me into this whole gig, which is another long story I could tell you about. The reason why I want to talk about this is, one, because of the bottle shape, which I've discussed; one, because of the fact that it was the first single still stuff, but also because it laid the foundation that rums could showcase the stills themselves without actually being blends. Of course, by that time, since 1992, we had the 15, the 12, the 21-year-old, the occasional 25s, and of course there was a 3 and the 8 that came later, and so on. But all those were blends. Those never really wasted their time too much with the stills. The stills became famous once the rum renaissance started to gather steam, which is why in the 2010s, you started to see more and more independent bottlers coming out with these things, with the Port Morant probably being the most famous, and in my case, a favorite, right? The thing is, though, at the time, they barely advertised this thing. It was really quite peculiar. You never saw that on their website. You never saw it seriously being showcased at any of the nascent rum festivals that were started to spring up at that time. And you rarely saw anything even on social media, which at that time was either the Ministry of Rum, the original website forum where most people gathered in those days, or Facebook, which just started around the same time. You never really saw much about it, right? Fortunately, as time went on and people started to kind of like review this, we started to get more information about it, but tantalizingly little. So we know it's an ICBU French Savalle Still. We know that it's 40%. We know why it was issued, but we don't know how old it is, because that's not actually mentioned anywhere. Now, in a Facebook clarification post many years ago, they did say that it was between 10, all 3 editions were between 10 and 12 years old. But when I contacted Carl Canto, who is a retired ex-production manager at DDL, he told me that all 3 bottles were between 13 and 16 years old. We're going to have to take this on faith. We really don't know, because there's nothing official that has ever been put in. The question then is at the remove of so many years, 15, is it still worth anything? And is, compared to the sort of cast strength monsters that we get these days, does it really make any sense to still buy this if we can see this coming onto the auction market or the secondary markets where we can buy these things? Well, it's thin. Compared to some of the more intense flavors that we are more used to now, perhaps, this doesn't really ring my bells all that much. We do get a fair amount of caramel, toffee, a little bit of molasses, a little bit of flowers, a little bit of salt, an olive or two, some ripe pears, white pears and peaches and so on. But it's thin pickings. let's assume for a second that it is 10 years old, or even as much as 13, right? There is actually not that much oak here. There's some vanilla, of course, and a bit of cinnamon spices. I tried this last night on the deck, and I thought it was actually kind of neat. But 40%, it's got to be stronger, right? Still, it does taste quite nice. It is the living room strength, as my friend Henrik used to say, does actually allow you to sip it neat. And if you drink it without any sort of contaminants to your palate, for example, if you've gone to a rum fest and you've had like 15 rums already, this isn't going to do much for you. But if you drink this without having had anything first, then it actually presents kind of nicely. It's what it is. It's somewhat indeterminate. So, you know, if you're looking for a UF30E Valier kind of experience, yeah, you definitely aren't going to get that. But you will get caramel, you will get toffee and bonbons, you will get vanilla and ice cream. There is a certain kind of potential lusciousness to it, shall I say, something that is more promised than actually delivered. And to some extent, I do have a problem with that. So overall, I think it is a nice piece of work, but these days, I think you'd probably get it more for historical value than anything else. Another reason why this thing is interesting in and of itself, well, it's not bad, is because it pointed the way to what was going to come later. DDL perhaps didn't promote this the way they should have, but over time, they started to see the impact of single still editions. And what they did, instead of using these bottles, they did actually have a Master Blenders edition, which I have somewhere in Calgary, which I will look at one of these days. But you know, over the years, they started to experiment. And, you know, those stubby bottles that they have now, the brown bottles with, the, you know, the red or black labels or what have you, that they have kind of standardized on those. So the 12 and the 15 in particular, they put extra finishes on them. They put them out the door at cask strength, and sometimes they showcase the stills. But this was the forerunner of them all. And this is why it's important. It showed that they were paying attention to what we were saying. It showed that they did understand the usefulness and the power of the heritage stills. And you know what? They may have issued it in 2007. They may have not advertised it worth a shit. They may not have put it on their website. They may not have talked about it very much. And to all but people like me who've been around since the Triassic, as a friend of mine once said, you know, it's a forgotten kind of thing. You won't get it because you want to have it for the taste. You'll get it because it's a piece of liquid history that showed the way DDL was going to go in the future. And perhaps for that reason, that's good enough. I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to score this about 80, maybe 82 points. It really doesn't deserve more than that, given the fact that it's so thin. There's this paucity of aromas and flavors that by today's standards isn't going to pass muster. But I do like it, and I do have good memories of it. And the very fact that I've kept the bottle after all these years shows something of the fact that it does still, you know, have a claim on my affections. So I'll leave it there, and I will talk to you next time. Cheers. Take care.